the returns have definitely improved on commercial solar in the last few years. And although, of course, the cost of solar isn't the only reason why people install solar panels, it is important, particularly for businesses. What we've seen is the cost of electricity go up very significantly in the last few years, and we can see that continuing, partly due to the scarcity, which is an ongoing issue, but more specifically to do with the war in the Ukraine, which has driven costs up, and now more recently the war in Iran, which has really pushed the price of electricity very high. To give you an idea, that's probably gone from somewhere around 10 pence per kilowatt hour 4 or 5 years ago up to over 20 pence per kilowatt hour now. On the other side, there is the fact that the cost of solar panels and the cost of installation has gone down very significantly. And this is driven by a lot of production going on around the world, particularly in China, and also the expertise being improved. So we've seen a lowering of cost in all sorts of areas, from the amount of material being used on the frames attaching panels to roofs, the amount of aluminium in the frame of a solar panel itself, as well as just the overall volume economics of mass-produced solar. Where we think we are now is a cost of what we call a levelized cost of energy generated by solar of somewhere in the kind of mid-single digits, somewhere about 5 or 6 pence per kilowatt hour over time that you're going to get from your solar panels. And that's in comparison to the figure that I mentioned earlier, which is that over 20 pence, sometimes as high as 30 pence for the energy that you have to buy from the grid. The other interesting thing with commercial organizations is when they use the energy. So as opposed to residential or homeowners who generally use the energy in the evening when they get back and in the morning when they wake up, commercial organizations tend to use their electricity mostly during the day, which is a really good match for solar generation. So when you get peak solar generation in the middle of the day, that is also when you're getting peak commercial demand. So there's a really good match there. The overall impact of these three things together has brought down the payback periods to somewhere between 3 and I would say 8 years for a commercial installation. And the difference between those two figures relate to the cost of the install itself. So where you get complicated roofs that might be quite high, taking quite a lot of scaffolding, maybe on slate roofs or tile roofs, you're going to end up with an installation cost which is pushing that payback up to maybe the 7-8 year time frame. Where you've got an easily accessible roof which doesn't require much scaffolding, which is fairly simple to connect to maybe a metal trapezoidal roof, that will be down closer to the 3-4 years. And these sorts of payback periods are starting to become extremely appealing to organizations and businesses. And also because the amount of energy used on site from the solar generated on your own roof is so high, you don't have to worry so much about the value of export electricity, for which you get a lot less. So again, for a residential installation, quite a lot of the energy generated might be exported onto the grid because you're not using it at the time. For a commercial organization, you would expect to use all the energy generated, so you'd get the maximum benefit. The other thing, which isn't necessarily related to the return on investment or the cost, is it's a very stable form of generation. So it's a very predictable form of generation. So For companies that want to have energy cost certainty into the future, solar is really good. You can't really predict what's going to happen to market energy prices. Like we've seen with the Iran war, you get a geopolitical situation that's going to impact your cost of energy. Once you've installed your solar panels, then the kilowatt hours and the energy you get from those is pretty certain for the duration, for the lifetime of that system. And like I said before, there are, of course, the non financial benefits, whether it's to do with your ESG and carbon reporting, whether it's your property is becoming increasing the value of your property or making your property more lettable, whether it's about brand advantage, tendering advantage, when you're tendering for work and you can uh, show that you are generating renewable energy. And also, we're finding some operational resilience that solar panels can bring, particularly when combined with battery storage, that if your business does get an outage, you've got some form of backup power.